This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good night, Rabbi. As we prepare for Parshas Beshalach, Klal Yisrael finally made their great escape. They had miraculously survived Egypt, experiencing the greatest series of miracles in the history of the world, coming to its climax with Kriyas Yamsuf, where they all received such a clear prophetic vision, to the point where even a simple Jew, even a maidservant, was able to point and say, Zakeli v'yanvehu, where every single Jew reached the level of prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu, Zakeli v'yanvehu aspaklaria ha'me'ira. And the pasuk says they went for 3 days, Vayechel shloshas yamim, they went for 3 days, shloshas yamim, v'lai matzu mayim, they couldn't find water. And they began to complain, and they began to rebel, Vayiloinu. Says the Gemara in Bava Kama, Daf Pei Beis, the deeper meaning of this pasuk of Vayechu shloshas yamim v'lai matzu mayim is not that they went 3 days without water, but rather what? Ein mayim ela Torah. Water is only Torah. It says shloshas yamim v'lai mayim. They went 3 days without Torah, and they rebelled. And therefore Moshe Rabbeinu was Masakin. He instituted the practice of Kriyas HaTorah. This way a Jew never goes 3 days without hearing the Torah publicly, Monday, Thursday, and Shabbos. And this way a Jew will never go 3 days without Torah. And the question is, they can't go 3 days without Torah. They've just been in Egypt for 210 years and they never rebelled and they never complained and they had no problem being without Torah for 210 years. And all of a sudden they can't go 3 days? What's 3 days compared to 210 years? One of the great Torah pioneers of the 20th century is a Gadol who not so much as people don't know that much about him. And that is the son of Rabbi Wasserman, Rav Simcha Wasserman. Rav Simcha saw the Chafetz Chaim right after the last Yom Kippur of the life of the Chafetz Chaim. And after Yom Kippur, Rav Simcha goes into the Chafetz Chaim to say goodbye. And as Rav Simcha was leaving, the Chafetz Chaim calls him back and he says, you should know, Simcha, you should know that when Mashiach comes, he's not going to forget about even one Jew. If there's one Jew at the end of the world, he's not going to forget about him. Reb Simcha would later say that these words of the Chafetz Chaim, these parting words, he felt were a special message to him. That somehow Chafetz Chaim knew that I was going to be traveling, and these were my instructions. That from this point on, Reb Simcha knew what his marching call in life was. Soon after his visit in the 30s to the Chafetz Chaim, Reb Simcha's traveling began. His father sent him in the 30s to Strasbourg, France, where Reb Simcha mastered French, and he established the only yeshiva in France at the time, which provided the seeds for the Torah community that lasts there until today. In 1938, his father instructed him to leave France to come to America and spread Torah in America, and this became Reb Simcha's pattern. He would come to a city, become the pioneer in the wilderness. He would establish a yeshiva in a place devoid of any Jewish education. And then as soon as the community started to take off, he would leave. And he would leave the running of the yeshiva to people that he often handpicked, and he would go on to a new wilderness. So for example, he started the first yeshiva in Washington Heights. He started the first yeshiva in Detroit, the first yeshiva in Los Angeles, and the first school for youngsters and adults in Southern California. Until he finally went to Eretz Yisrael, and they established a yeshiva together with the son of Rameir Chadash. In fact, after World War II, Rav Simcha volunteered to go to Europe under the auspices of the Vad Hatzalah, and all of a sudden he sees a train of 400 orphan children that were collected from monasteries and convents all over Europe. He accompanies this train till Paris, and he began to establish yeshiva bachram to learn with these Jewish children that had been either deposited or kidnapped during the war. Rav Simcha and his Rebbetzin Rachel Wasserman, Rebbetzin Fega Rachel Wasserman, were not blessed with children. During his first 2 years in Los Angeles, his Rebbetzin had to stay behind in Detroit, where she was a teacher, and she would send her meager salary to LA to help him start the yeshiva. On one occasion, he wanted to leave Los Angeles. The separation was becoming much too long. And he didn't feel it was right to his wife. So he writes to her that he's going to come to Detroit. The Rebbetzin responded that if Hashem has not blessed us with children, then it's only because He wants you to establish more yeshivas and have more talmidim. Because what else are we going to leave over in this world? So I insist you continue. I will continue to support you from Detroit. And this way, the many Jewish children that you educate will be our children. As a young man, Rav Simcha Wasserman studied in Nevardik. He was under the guidance of the Alter of Nevardik. He would travel from one place to another to educate Jewish children all over Europe. In those days, right after the Russian Revolution, traveling became very dangerous and you had to have a permit. And on one time he was caught without a permit. He was sentenced to a work camp. He was beaten by other prisoners. He had to wake up every morning to quickly put on his talis and tefillin and daven in order to keep kashrus. He only ate bread and water for years. When this whole ordeal was over, Reb Simcha was released. He was trying to sneak into Poland, cross the Polish border. He was again arrested by the Red Army. He was put under the custody of the commissar. When they were alone, the commissar revealed to Reb Simcha that he was Jewish. And he says, I'm going to sneak you into Poland. He snuck him into Poland. Reb Simcha crossed the border, and after walking and then crawling for many, many miles, he made it to Mezrich for Shabbos. Eventually, through Brisk, he arrives back in his hometown in Baranovich. His mother sees him after years and years. She brings him back into the house. Reb Elchanan takes a look at his son he hasn't seen for years. First he made a Shachiyanu. Then he made a Mechaye HaMesim. Then he opened up the Gemara and he said, sit and learn, without saying a word. Reb Elchanan Wasserman, Reb Simcha Wasserman. Says Reb Simcha, in Egypt they beat us, they tortured us, they harassed us, we were brutalized, we were persecuted. That was enough to remind us who we were. But the moment we were free and we tasted freedom, the Jew forgets their identity, and in only 3 days we begin to rebel. Under persecution, under torture, the Jew could survive. But at the moment the Jew tastes freedom, you can't be without Torah. And we can make the same case today in America in 2015. That as important as learning Torah has always been for our people, today it is as critical as ever, more important than ever. Today in the post-Holocaust era here in America, even though it's a Malchus Shal Chesed, it's a kingdom of kindness, but with all of our freedoms comes the greatest threat that the Jewish people has ever experienced. 70% of all marriages that take place in the United States of America are intermarriages. Even Hitler was not able to destroy 70% of our people. And this is something that should shake us to the core. And even if you think that you're protected, my community, my family is immune to this, but the ideas, ideals, attitudes that we're bombarded with from the culture, from our society, threaten to undermine the eternal values of the Jew. And therefore, as much as learning Torah was important and vital and critical to our people, never in our history has learning Torah been more important than today. We all know the pasuk in Mishlei. We say it when we put back the Sefer Torah, Eitz Chayim hi l'machazikim ba. The Torah is a tree of life to those who grab a hold of it. You know what this pasuk means? Says Reb Chaim Volozhiner. Imagine a person drowning in a raging river, and the water is pulling him down, and he sees a strong tree growing by the riverbank. What would that person do to that tree? He certainly would muster all of his strength to grab a hold of the tree with all of his might. He would not let go even for a moment, because he knows, what's this tree? It's a tree of life. Would anyone have the audacity or the foolishness to grab a hold of the tree with one pinky or with 2 fingers or even 1 hand? The person would take every finger and every ounce of strength and grab a hold of the tree with all of their might. Because the tree is a tree of life, says Reb Chaim Volozhiner. This world is a raging river. The pleasures of the world, the society we live in, the challenges of the world, with all of its freedom and liberties. but they exert a very powerful force on us, and they threaten to pull us down. But the good news is there's a tree that we can grab onto. And that tree will keep us afloat, and that tree will keep us alive, and that tree is the Eitz Chaim, the Torah HaKadosha. It's a tree of life. But only l'machazikim ba, only to those who grab a hold of it, not half-heartedly, not a little bit. L'machazikim ba, to those who grab a hold of it with all their might. Let us grab a hold of this Eitz Chaim, v'chol koichenu, with all of our strength. And thereby the Yibam will bless us all. B'birchas ha-Torah, oirach yomim b'yamina, with long life, u'semoila, oisher, v'kavod, prosperity, honor, and good health. Yimali Hashem kol mishalasenu l'toiva, agun Shabbos.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.